Well, hi, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are watching from. Hopefully this is all going fine. I just have my iPad here just to make sure that it's all running. It looks like it's running fine. So thanks for joining this live stream. Lots of you are already in the live stream, asking a whole bunch of questions, which I will come to in a second. And first of all, I want to say that hopefully you have better sound. I know a couple of people had feedback that they found a little bit echoey before, so I've changed mics once again, and hopefully that's a little bit of a better sound. So today I'm going to touch on a couple of questions that have been asked to me, and of course I will try and do as many of the questions that get posted during the course of this live stream today. So thanks very much again for joining. So why don't I kick straight in and go through some of the questions that I've got, and I'll use my iPad here just to have a look and see. So one of the questions that came up very early on even before the live stream started was around the whole area of vaccines. Now, many of you might have seen in my most recent update, I posted the situation where Saga Cruises here in the UK have announced that all passengers who go on their cruises will need to have proof of vaccine, and they will have had to have both doses, because all of the approved ones so far are a 2-dose process, and they have to have had both doses and 14 days before they can cruise. Now, I think it's kind of unique. Saga is pretty unique. First of all, the UK is moving pretty fast in terms of the whole vaccination process, and they expect to have all over 70s done by the middle of February. I think it's about March for all the over 60s, and by about May time also all the over 50s. And bear in mind that Saga cater for the over 50 cruiser, and most of their guests are actually in the older age bracket. So they are also the most vulnerable to coronavirus. So it makes a lot of sense for them. They're a pretty small line. They have 2 ships. It's caused a lot of debates around what's going to happen now. At this stage, no other cruise line has come out and said that vaccines are going to be a thing. However, the direction of traffic does seem to be heading more and more towards the vaccinated way. So, for example, the Seychelles have announced that you can circumvent all the quarantining if you've had vaccines. And we know that lots of governments and institutions and people are working on sort of coronavirus testing and vaccine protocols. So at this stage, it is only Saga Cruises, and it's one of the things I would say, which is very interesting. I did a survey amongst most of my followers, most of which of you are like me. They're over 50 and they're 60s in this case, and nearly 75% of people supported that idea. On my channel, I've had a lot of people who are very anti-vaccines and are really upset about it. So I guess the answer we will find out. We know that Qantas have said they like to use vaccines. I think one of the things that we like to see, a lot of what the cruise lines do will depend on what the countries do. Like some countries you have to have a yellow fever vaccine or whatever. So it's going to be interesting to see. But certainly the question that got asked, and it's not showing up here who asked that question, but Derek. The question that Derek asked is, are there going to be cruises that won't require a vaccine? At this stage, the only one that does require a vaccine is Saga, and we will see how that plays out. We know Norwegian is looking at it. We know Royal Caribbean are looking at it. And I think it's probably going to be a long way, which leads me into my second point about cruising and when it's going to start. Now, look, there was a lot of excitement for those of you who have been on Twitter today, where people picked up that on the US travel advisory site, it specifically said that the no-sell order out of the US had been extended to September. And however, when you click on all of the links, that does appear to be an error, because all the links which go through to the CDC site are very clear that what exists is the framework to conditional sailing, which came out in October, and there's no change to that. However, we've seen all of the US lines pretty much. There's actually Disney haven't done it yet, but they've stopped selling all their April cruises. MSC out of the US haven't done it, but pretty much all of them have moved to May. And there's lots of speculation, of course, that's going to take much longer. We're waiting to see what the updated advice, if any, comes from the new CDC head. So the Biden administration has appointed a new head of the CDC, and she's said very clearly that she is reviewing all of the travel guidance. So we've seen already some things in the US. So certainly, I think we're going to see a while before the vaccine issue plays out, because I think cruising, is still looking some way off. So Derek, the answer to your question is only Saga, at this point in time. So Peter raises the point around, why don't cruise lines just go ahead and cancel cruises that have no hope of going ahead? For example, 14-day cruises to the Baltics in May 2021. I'm not sure which line that is, but certainly I know there's some like Viking, P&O, I guess, are doing that. And I think we will see in the next couple of days or weeks what some of those lines are doing, because certainly we're seeing the EU talking about locking down their borders much more. They're actually got a meeting this week where it's been proposed that they close their borders to non-EU residents. So that would include the UK, which is of course not part of the EU. And we're seeing the UK talking about moving to the Australian, New Zealand style hotel quarantine possibly. So I think a lot of it we will see over the next week or two, what's likely, what the perspective is on those cruises. And I think we will see imminently, Peter, what's going to happen. Now, bear in mind, it's only the US that's banned cruises of longer than 7 days. Certainly out of Europe, theoretically at the moment, they can go. I certainly am increasingly pessimistic about an early start in cruising. And I think, Peter, you're right. It's unlikely that these cross-country cruises are going to go. I think we are likely, if we're lucky, to see May, June time, some local cruising. We've seen already today, or not today, just towards the end of last week, that Costa Cruises have postponed resuming cruises, even out of Italy, which is one of the first, right through to March or so. And so I think we're going to see a lot of action over the next week or two, particularly as we're now seeing a real hardening of border locking. I think the other point, though, is bear in mind that from the cruise line's perspective, every cruise that's booked, they're getting deposits, they're getting final balances. Around about 50% of people are taking future cruise credit, not cash. So it does help them quite a lot with cash flow as well, certainly. So I think that could be one of the reasons. So let's have a look. The reason I'm using my iPad, by the way, is I found when I was looking at it on my actual screen, I found it much harder and I was losing comments, but I'm finding actually on iPad it's a little bit easier. So hopefully that works a little bit easier. So I've got quite a few questions here around here we go. This is the point that Innocence Abroad had asked. Can you clarify what appears to be the rumor of the CDC no sail extension through September? I don't know whether you heard that point. It does appear to be something that's wrong on the site. So I've actually got the site and I'm going to check on it. But certainly the CDC rule framework is going and is what is in place at the moment. Importantly, of course, what we're seeing, all the cruise lines telling us, is the CDC has been extremely slow to move forward through that process. So hopefully you heard that, or I apologize if I have repeated that. So let me go back and have a look around. Lots of people from the US right across on the West Coast. So that's great. Thanks for getting up. I suppose it's 9 o'clock, so it's not that early. So let's have a look. So what I was saying is quite a few questions about Alaska. We've got a question here for Adventures of J and M. Have an Alaska cruise booked in August. Any word that there was strict capacity on the ships? And Hadrian says, we have a Holland America Alaska cruise in September 2021 and an Antarctica cruise in January. Optimistic that Antarctica will take place, but less so about Alaska. What do you think? And there may be a few more. I do want to talk a little bit about Alaska because a lot of people got a little bit skittish, jittery when they saw the announcement by Royal Caribbean that they were cancelling Quantum of the Seas whole Alaska season. And the reason for that is the ship that's sailing out of Singapore, and they decided to keep that in Singapore. But of course, a lot of people wonder if that was the beginning of the process. I probably share your reservations about Alaska, particularly the beginning to the middle of the season. I think it's less clear what's going to happen at the end, but I'll come on in a second. There's a couple of big barriers that are in place that have to get solved. The first of which is the CDC framework for sailing. That is absolutely fundamental because until they get a license to sail, Alaska season is off. The cruise lines have told us that they haven't even got from the CDC the technical details to be able to run the test cruises. So at the moment, they're getting their crew back. They have to go through a whole lot of protocols to get sign off on their COVID protocols for the crew. They have to build up testing capabilities, and then they can apply for test cruises. They can't actually apply for test cruises because the CDC basically hasn't issued specifications. They then have to, once they've got the specifications, plan the test cruises. They have to recruit people to the test cruises, run the test cruises, have them evaluated. And then there's a 60-day minimum period from the time that they finish the test cruises and apply for the license for conditional sailing. So that's 2 months, basically. So if you think around it, they've already pushed stuff back to May. So say that even optimistically they're able to run those in April, that's May and June gone before they even get a license. If they run them in March, I guess that's April, May, they could start in June. So already, unless something miraculous happens and they can run those test cruises much quicker, which seems unlikely with the way that the wave of coronavirus is all around the world, including the US, Europe, UK, which is especially bad in the UK with that new variant, concerned about new variants moving around, locking up borders. Bear in mind, one of the rules in the US now is when you return to the US from having been abroad, you have to have a COVID-19 test, and there's discussion around quarantining. So if you went on a cruise out of the US, you would have to have a test on board, and there's a risk of quarantine. So there's all that to solve. So it's very hard to see how test cruises are going to even run. So that's one issue. Second issue is Canada have to open. Now, if you've seen, I actually saw a tweet today from Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister, I guess, of Canada, where he said, if you've booked a foreign holiday, so this is obviously to Canadians, if you've booked a foreign holiday, cancel it in the run up to spring and summer. It's not going to happen. He's saying to people, do not plan to travel. Now, bear in mind that Canada has to open for Alaska to run, because under the Passenger Act in the US, all the ships have to leave the US, go to a foreign country, which in this case is Canada for Alaska. So it looks like Canada's going to take some time to open their borders, with Justin Trudeau basically telling Canadians not to book international travel through till past spring into summer. So that's the next the whole next problem. Then you have the whole issue of the protocols, what happens in land, what you can do with excursions, and so on, because most of the protocols are talking about these very controlled excursions. So you have that whole hurdle. You then hit the problem is then lines have to decide, is it worth deploying all of those ships to Alaska? Many of them, like Holland America, Princess, they own all the lodges in Alaska, so they have to decide, do they open those up or not? So certainly, as you can see, there's a lot of hurdles around Alaska opening. Now, could that get solved by the summer? Could it open by later in the season? Yeah, so I would be tempted if I had an Alaska. I've already had my Alaska cruise canceled, and I've just shifted it to next year. I certainly would be tempted if I had an Alaska cruise to see if I can move it to much later in the area. Come back to the point you said about Antarctica. I'm also a little bit like you. I am optimistic about Antarctica opening up, because I think there will be such lockdown protocols happening. I think many of you know, I have a cruise in November, which moved from from last year. It's a Cunard Antarctica cruise, 3 weeks. But what I'm seeing increasingly the excursion companies talk about, expedition companies talking about, is creating these bubbles where people have to arrive early, or they're on a charter flight. They get them in the hotel, they do the testing, they effectively quarantine them before they get on the ship. They can do really strict protocols on the ship. Once they set off from the ship, you are once you set off and you head to Antarctica, you are in a bubble. So they can do a lot of ensuring that people, once they get on, are fine. So I am more optimistic about Antarctica, but as we've learned, everything changes. Well, thank you. I've seen John has done a super chat. Great, John. Keep up the good work. That's very much appreciated. Thanks. Thanks very much. So hopefully that's answered the question on Alaska. I feel like I'm being a little bit doom and gloom, but I think it's increasingly looking very challenging for cruising to open up, certainly increasingly in the first half of the year. Good, Derek says it's coming through nice and clear, so that's good to know. Derek also asks another question, which is around, when are you going to have a cruise for your YouTube subscribers, or did I miss that cruise? That would be great to hang out with you in person. I have thought about running some kind of group cruise. Toyed with the idea, wasn't sure. What I was thinking of doing was perhaps experimenting a little bit more with letting people know in advance, quite far in advance, because I'm planning 2022, is what cruises I'm going to be on, and perhaps then do some more informal get-togethers and see how that goes. I know some other cruise vloggers have got a group cruise coming up. So Chad Cruises, I think, apologize if I've got the name wrong, I'll put a link in later. They've set up a group cruise for 2023. So maybe I'll also have a chat with them and see how it's going. And Sean and Steph, they've also got one organized. So I will certainly take a look at them. Maybe we'll try something more informal and see how that goes. But I'm guessing we probably need to set it aside. But certainly maybe I'll do a poll also on the channel and see if other people are keen to meet up with me. Certainly when I've been on cruises, it's great when people who follow the channel come up and chat. And one of the things I've found actually is I've been on quite a lot of cruises in the good old days, where what's happened is on the last day of the cruise or the second last day of the cruise, often when there's like the captain's gala do or whatever, people have come up to me and said, oh, by the way, are you Gary Bembridge? We follow your channel. We really like your channel. Here's what we like and whatever. And it's been great to then chat to them and meet real people because you understand what they want. Of course, what they haven't done is shouted at the beginning of the cruise. So that's great. And I have had some people do that, and it's been fantastic because then during the cruise I can get to know them. We can talk about what they like, and I get lots of ideas and tips from kind of real people. So if you're ever on a cruise with me, let me know. So that's something I will have another think about. The other question that they did ask was around the area of reduced capacity. Sorry, that was the other point on Alaska. Do I think the cruises, if they and when they do run in Alaska, will run with reduced capacity? Absolutely, 100%. They will run with reduced capacity. And the reason for that is in the whole protocols that have been agreed under this whole framework for conditional sailing, reduced capacity, testing, masks, social distancing, no self-service dining, all that kind of stuff is a part of that package, and that will absolutely be the case. The conditional order runs right the way through to November at the moment. I guess as we see vaccines roll out, as things adapt for that, that may change. My personal view is I think cruising will be one of the last bits of travel that's allowed to get going, probably, and will be one of the last that also lets any relaxation of the protocol. So I think it's absolutely 100% sure. Sorry, I've just dropped my glasses. Sorry about that. So I think the protocols will sell. And that's one of the important things to bear in mind for 2021 is the protocols will absolutely be in place. Paul and Carol have joined. They certainly, hi Paul and Carol, again, I think I mentioned them last time. They have a great channel. I've been on lots of cruises with them. So to have a look at their channel, maybe Paul and Carol, you could pop a link if you're on, just pop a link in the chat for anyone that wants to follow that. And also Innocence Abroad, who are also on the channel that I mentioned earlier, they also have a channel. Because they couldn't cruise, they did a whole lot of train travel. I'm a bit of a train addict, so they also have a new video premiering right at the end of this. So maybe they can put a link to their channel if you want to go and look at what they're doing. You can also do that. And certainly, Paul and Carol will be very busy on live streams. They were on Emma Cruise's live stream a little bit earlier today, so they're doing a whole live stream Saturday. I guess that's one thing with lockdown is we have time to do some of these things. John Lewis, who again very kindly did the super chat, has said he's waiting for his Royal Caribbean refund, didn't want to fall into the future cruise credit and no cash refund issue, but hopefully my January 2022 cruise will happen, had 5 cruises cancelled. The whole issue of future cruise credit versus taking refunds is a big issue. I'm going to do a whole series of things on that in the shorts. I'll talk about shorts maybe a little bit later, because a lot of people have asked, and also in the last live stream asked about future cruise credits, what you can use it for, what you can't use it for. So now what I've done is very early on, when it first started, we all thought cruises would be running by June 2020. I took a couple of future cruise credits. Since then, I have not taken future cruise credits. I have taken refunds. That then gives me the flexibility as things chop and change, because when cruises do come back, I think they're going to be brand new cruises, different cruises, maybe local cruises, and by taking the money back, I can change cruise lines or whatever. Be interested to know how long you've been waiting for that refund. Certainly, refunds have got a little bit faster. I know people are still struggling with Crystal, but certainly I've been taking cash. And what I've been doing with what I haven't done is where I've paid low deposits on things. So, for example, I had Princess Cruise. I paid like £50, $75 or whatever, and I've just rolled that over to next year because, like, it's nothing in the scheme of things. So let's keep going. Gary P asks, "What is your favorite Cunard ship?" Cunard is a line. When I look at all of the cruise lines that I've been on, Cunard is actually the line that I've spent the most amount of time on in terms of number of days. And that's probably because it was Cunard that I first started traveling on. So QE2. My partner is an absolute Cunard fanatic, loves the Queen's Grill, loves the dressing up. So whenever I'm traveling, not sort of doing stuff on my channel by myself, and I'm trying to convince my partner to go on a vacation, we normally end it back up on Cunard, just because that's what he prefers. So in terms of favorite ship, it's a difficult one, because I've had probably some of the best times on Queen Victoria. I really like Queen Victoria, I like the size of the ship, I like the layout, I like the look of the ship. I also like the fact you've got the Queen's Court, Princess Court right at the top of the ship. But of course, the Queen Mary 2 is absolutely magical, and in terms of just it being an incredible experience, it's one of a kind, because Queen Victoria, Queen Elizabeth, it's the same ship as New Amsterdam, Holland American New Amsterdam, Arcadia, it's the same basic ship, the same hull, etc. So I would say, Queen Victoria is where it would be the one that I would gravitate towards, but Queen Mary 2 is very special. So I've sort of slightly hedged a bit. I'm very interested to see what their new ship is going to be like. It's going to be very interesting, because it seems a little bit more of a purpose build. So that's going to be very, very interesting. So let's go. Lots of very nice comments. Thank you from Joe Mayer. John Lewis, again, just that's come up, is we all seem to be talking about the US CDC. I wonder when our UK ports will reopen. And that's one that I've been thinking about a lot too. The Maritime Minister, whose name I forget offhand, I did refer to him in my last video, has made it very clear that, first of all, on the plus side, they're very happy with the protocols. So they're very happy with all of the stuff that's been put together by the cruise lines selling out of the UK in terms of the testing process, the reduced capacity, and so on, all those kind of things that we know. But what he's said is he's not prepared to commit in any way to a date for cruising resuming until the cases in the UK come down significantly. Now, what they originally said, for those of you in the UK, is, if you remember, we had the tier system, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, tier 4, before we went into this big lockdown, again now where they scrapped the tiers, is what they said at the time is the UK would have to be in or pretty much all headed back into tier 2 before they would commit to a new opening of ports allowing cruises to resuming. Now, clearly we were a very long way from that at this point in time. I guess we don't know whether in February, whether the lockdown will ease. I think we get a lot of suggestions it won't ease. Is it March? Is it April? So I think it's going to be some time. The cruise lines, I can tell you what the cruise lines are saying and hoping, because they're lobbying. They're trying to get the government to agree some limited sailings in spring. Now, if you look at when they've cancelled to, most of them have cancelled to April, May time. What was interesting is Saga, they've shifted their maiden voyage on Spirit of Adventure to May the 4th, which is a fantastic day. It's my birthday. And then the Spirit of Discovery is only in June. So I would say that they have a feel that May, June is much more likely. Now, what's interesting is the May trip is much more local. Once again, to June, it's a much more international trip. So I think the lines are thinking maybe May, maybe June time. And certainly what they're hoping is, and they're pushing for really hard though, is to try and get, I guess, around Easter time, some around UK sailings. But I would say the indications are it's probably around then. If we also think about the timings of the vaccine rollouts, we know that by that sort of May time, a lot of like the over 50s, for example, should have hit the numbers. So that's my guess. If I was a betting, then I would say May would be the time based on the noises that are being made. Derek asks, do you own any cruise stocks? The only cruise stocks that I own, and I've owned them for a very long time, is Carnival. And the reason I bought Carnival stock at the time is in those good heady old days, must have been 10 years ago, maybe or so. My view is that cruising was going to grow. It would grow a lot, and the shares did grow a lot, and that's all gone, as we know. So that was one reason. And the other reason was because at the time I was mostly cruising on Carnival ships. So doing, as I mentioned, lots of Cunard trips, Princess, Holland America, some Seabourn, etc. So I decided, because you can get extra onboard credit, it was worth having some Carnival shares, because over that time period it would pay off. So those are the only ones that I owned. I don't own any of the others, and even when they crashed, I didn't buy any more. So those are the only ones that I own. The reason I bought them was actually more for the perks, which I thought they would pay for themselves over time. I'm not sure that that's really true, but anyway. So let's have a look. I booked on Horizon. One of the things I think people are talking about, if I understand Michelle talking correctly, is do you think Carnival will start sailing by October? They've already been cancelled and rebooked October, Miami out of Horizon. By October, I think we're likely to see action. Certainly, the cruise lines are very interesting. The cruise lines, when they've been in various travel agent events, have really sort of spoken about Q4 as being when they're most confident about being able to run what's planned. So I'd say by October, November, December is when they're expecting to be able to run. One of the things, of course, that we saw with Carnival, as you know, they just this week announced their extension of shutdown, what do you want to call it, but they cancelled their entire European season, I guess because they decided, because of the uncertainty of Europe, moving a ship to Europe didn't make sense. So are Canary Island cruises, so Arnie, why are Canary Island cruises generally more expensive than Mediterranean cruises? I don't know. The only reason I can probably speculate is just the amount of distance. I guess there's quite a few sea days there, so there's quite a lot of fuel being used. I'm guessing. I don't really know, but I'll actually see if I can find out a better answer, a much better answer for you than that one. People are saying MSC were very quick to refund. Royal Caribbean refunded their onboard bookings, but they'll take a few months. Certainly, they were pretty slow initially at refunding. It took not that much time. I got a very quick refund from Royal Caribbean. The one that I found really, really slow was Norwegian. I didn't have any Crystal bookings, but I know a lot of people are still quite frustrated with Crystal. One of the things that is important to note about taking future cruise credit, just why I think about that as well, is pretty much every single line, once you've taken future cruise credit, you can't convert that to cash later. So that's another reason you need to think very carefully is if you take future cruise credit and then for whatever reason you don't want to cruise, can't cruise, is you're likely to lose it. There's very few lines that will allow you to convert it back into cash. So that's a pretty important thing to note when you look at the whole area of future cruise credits. Do you know the types of COVID tests they're going to use? Nose swab or saliva test? I wouldn't do a nose test. Saliva is totally fine. Unfortunately, you're going to be disappointed because, again, it depends a little bit on where you're cruising. But pretty much everyone is using the nose swab tests, even if it's the fast tests. So in the US, the CDC, which is one of the big challenges, has specifically required the full PCR test for cruising in their protocols. Now, this gives the cruise lines an enormous challenge, which hasn't really been discussed because a full PCR test takes quite a long time to come back. It could take 24 hours or longer to do. So that is a massive challenge because if you're testing people, you've always got to put them in some form of quarantine. So that's one of the things I haven't seen the answer, how they're solving that problem, but they are really, really clear on that. And that, of course, is a nose test. Now, the fast tests that others are using, so for example, MSC was using the fast test. So in the UK, again, for example, in the community big testing, you can go, even if you don't have any symptoms, and have a test. So my partner actually went because they had what they thought might have been some, maybe just a feeling a bit down. And, you know, all the different councils, you can just walk in and have one of those tests. That, again, is a nose test, a nose and throat test, but you only get the results in half an hour. So that was the type that were being used by MSC and some of the other lines. What's happened in Singapore, for example, and what AIDA were doing, and with the German line, is they were requiring you to go for a full PCR test between 48 and 72 hours before. So again, the nose test. So certainly if you are against the nose test, certainly at this time, it's not going to be good news for you. I'm afraid. Let me just go back because I feel like I might have missed some of the questions. KB in the UK. Hi, KB. KB's one of the channel members and a big supporter of the channel. So good to see you on the live stream. And so KB's asking, our Odyssey inaugural cruise from Southampton to Barcelona was cancelled for early April. Do you have an update on the opening of Spanish ports, please? No, I don't, other than they seem to be taking a very similar position to the UK. So the only places that have actually opened to cruising at the moment is Italy, which then got everyone to shut down again, and they are now sort of letting people open up again. So MSC are hoping to go in January, I think 24th. Costa have pushed theirs back to March time. Greece was letting ships call in, but and France is letting French only ones do. But Spain have taken a pretty conservative approach. I think they're very close to the UK in their timeline. So there's been nothing. And also what's important, I guess, about both the UK and Spain is they have no timeline. They have no date. So we know, for example, the Canadians have a date when they said the cruise ship ban will expire. In Australia, I think, don't quote me on this, but I think it's the 31st of March, if I remember. I think the Canadian one might be that as well. They have dates where they physically will renew it. It's just, it's an ongoing unknown, so no. Oh, and this is what I've said, the Chad cruises, their cruises 6th to the 13th, 2022. So I think I might have said 2023. I think you're right, 2022, which is Norwegian Cruise Line Encore to Miami Eastern. So certainly, maybe I'll chat to them. I'll find out a bit more about the whole group cruise idea and see if that's something that's worth having a go. One of the things I was thinking was around maybe a couple of us, people who have channels, maybe club together, do one cruise, so there's actually a chance to meet other people and stuff. So that's something maybe we'll have a look at as well. Are you expecting Iceland and Greenland being a major cruising destination for mainstream cruise lines, which Arnie is asking? Iceland, definitely, and it already is pretty much, many of the cruise lines will head up their Saga, which we spoke about a bit earlier. It's a very important itinerary for them. I've been there on Windstar. I've been there on Voyage to Antiquity, which doesn't really exist anymore. And I certainly, when we were there, we saw AIDA ships. We saw Mein Schiff ships. I think I'm around saying the P&O go there. What tends to happen is they don't run it as a whole season. They might run one or two trips there because it's quite a long way to get there. So, for example, I think both the Voyage to Antiquity and the Windstar one, I think that was probably like a 10 to 14 day cruise because it's quite a way to get there. So, and it does tend to be quite an expensive trip. I actually did the Saga one once, but I actually joined it there and did part of the cruise. But Iceland definitely, and it's becoming pretty popular. It is quite an expensive cruise because, again, Iceland, anyone who's ever visited Iceland. Greenland less so, but Greenland, there are a number of cruises for Greenland, but they tend much more to be the expedition style because of the nature of the places you call. So they're pretty remote, so you need things like RRB boats and that kind of stuff. So there tends to be more expedition style cruising. So let's have a look. If you booked a cruiser plan, if you booked, right, this is a good point. This is an interesting one that Wallace has asked. If you booked a cruise, the plan stops in 3 countries, but one of them remains closed to ships well before embarkation date. Will the cruise line allow you to cancel the cruise? The short answer to that is probably no. However, because of the way things are going, that may be different. Now, what's important to note, and this is one of the things I've been saying to people when they look at booking cruises until things have settled down, is in the cruise contract, the cruise line has the right to change ports, change itineraries quite significantly without giving you the chance to cancel or any compensation. So, for example, so if you go on a cruise and because of weather you don't call in a certain port, the most the cruise lines will do is refund you any excursions you've paid for. It's very, very unusual that you get any form of compensation if there's some bigger, more fundamental problem. So I've been on a cruise, for example, around UK, That was also on one start, actually. And I think we missed about 3 stops in the end, because right up the top, going around the top of, through Scotland, it was really bad weather, and a lot of them were tender ports, and we just couldn't get in. So, but, that was it. It was just your kind of bad luck. So it's very, so under their contract, no. So if they will just change the itinerary. So instead of going to, say, Grand Cayman, for example, are saying we might not take ships this year. So they might, or Key West, again, is another example. So Key West, for example, say you've got Key West in your itinerary and Grand Cayman, and both of those stay closed. What they will do more likely is they'll call in the Bahamas, and they'll go to, I don't know, Costa Maya or something instead. So that would be the normal situation. You'll just get advised. It's going to be interesting, though, with whether they are more flexible, understanding that things are changing really fast, but also still a lot of the cruise lines, with their cruise with confidence, you still have the right, and again it keeps volume dates, to often cancel cruises at short notice, get future cruise credit and change it. So that's important. I think if you're booking a cruise, have a look what those policies are, because it is possible that you don't want to go cruising, you don't like the protocols, or you're right, the itinerary could change. But pretty much standard, it's that no would be the answer to that. And Seared's just also confirmed that. Arnie's asked a question: do you think specialty dining to be worth the surcharge? Any cruise lines where there is a noticeable difference? I have a sort of a love-hate relationship with specialty dining. Specialty dining is incredibly popular, and the cruise lines have more and more and more of it because it is very popular. And there's a group of people who like specialty dining a lot. I tend to think like the food in many of the other venues included is fantastic. And so I, with my sort of normal cruiser hat on, I don't see it as a big thing. But when I'm on a cruise, I feel I need to go because I want to be able to take pictures, video, and cover what they are, what they're like. So is it worth it? I tend to think it is worth it if there's a very specific type of food. So for example, if you like sushi, or you're a big steak fan, or Mexican, or whatever's on the ship, it is worth it. And it's certainly worth it if you have a special event. So often when you go to special dining, there's loads of people there having anniversaries, birthdays, because that's, I guess, people go on cruises a lot for. What I think is interesting is we're seeing a couple of lines which are starting to include specialty dining. Now, what we're seeing lots of deals at the moment. So I think pretty much all the cruises I've got through into next year on those lines that have specialty dining, I think all of them I've got a deal where some kind of specialty dining is included. So what they've done is they're trying to hold this is one trend I've definitely seen, is they're trying to hold the overall price of the cruise, and they're building in extras. They're building in gratuities, drinks packages, onboard credit towards excursions, so many specialty dining. So we're seeing that trend. Or we're seeing, of course, lines like Virgin, which have included all their specialty dining options within your overall fare. So I'm probably more in the camp of, I'm not a big fan of specialty dining, but I do a lot more because of the channel. And I kind of feel you've paid to have great food already, so you're paying more to go, because it is. I think specialty dining is pretty expensive. But just to know if other people have a different perspective. I know some people absolutely love specialty dining. I like it personally if it's something like sushi stuff, which you don't normally always have included in there. So let's go back. I've seen a couple of questions about Azamara, which I guess I'm not surprised people are asking. And Gavin and Luke asked something, and I've lost their quote. Gavin and Luke are, again, some other, they have their channel's called Holidays at Sea, and it's definitely worth following them, particularly if you're UK, because they have some great P&O stuff. In fact, that reminds me now, come back to Iceland. They were in Iceland on P&O, and I can't remember which P&O ship it is. They can maybe put it in here, which was at the same time, and we were actually in one of the ports at the same time, and we're trying to kind of connect, but it didn't happen, as often happens. But definitely, to have a look at that. I'm trying to. I think Paul and Carol are talking about Paul and Carol and stuff. I think they're talking about my point about letting people know what cruises are. So I think I'll start doing that. Actually, that will be quite good. Tips for getting a good deal for single travelers, please, Tina. Now, Tina, this single travel thing is something that I have a lot of interest in, partly because I travel a lot solo. for the channel. And most of the trips I go on, I would, probably 90% of the trips I go on, I pay completely for myself. I do get invited on some trips. They tend to be more new ships. You find what happens, the great thing about being based in Europe, if you're a travel blogger or a travel vlogger, is because all the new ships, when they come out of the shipyard, they often do a bit of a shakedown cruise where they will invite lots of media and travel agents to go for a 1 night, 2 night, or something like that. So that's a lot of what I get asked on. So a lot of the people that I've already mentioned, we often get a chance to meet up with each other on those cruises. So solo cruising is a really big thing and fair for me. I've got a couple of videos about solo cruising. The short answer is it's quite difficult. And the secret with solo deals is you can obviously focus on a couple of lines which have solo-only cabins. Norwegian is the most developed of those. Unfortunately, they're all inside cabins, so that doesn't appeal to me. Saga, if you're in the UK and want to go on a cruise line that caters for the over 50 traveler, on their new ships, there are 2 new ships, I think it's something like 20% of all cabins are solo cabins in all classes. So they have they only have balcony because they've never been inside. They have balcony, they even have suites, etc. But they're quite expensive. Some of the big Royal Caribbean ships, they have solo cabins. Some of the Cunard ships have cabins, but it's quite hard to find. So the best way of doing it is sign up to the lines that you like for their email newsletters for when they do solo promotions. If you use a travel agent, ask them to keep an eye out for solo travel deals. Look on a site like Vacations to Go. So one of those people that collate cruises. So on Vacations to Go, even if you don't book for them, it doesn't really matter. But on Vacations to Go, they have a solo section where they will list any deals that are going for solo travelers. What I tend to do is I look particularly for out of season or early season, end of season. That's when you tend to get the better deals. If you travel ultra luxury, Silversea is a really good one because Silversea, again, on their site, they have a section for solo travelers. Ponant do the same, where they, on certain sailings, they offer deep discounts, like 10% surcharge only, maybe 20% surcharge. But take a look at some of the videos. I probably do it a little bit more structured than I probably did there. But it's a really big challenge. And if you want to go river cruising, it's almost impossible to do. So let me go. Here we go. They're talking about Gavin and Luke's Arcadia. That was episode on Arcadia. That was the one I was talking about with Iceland. Oh, here we go. So Brooke was asking about Pacific Princess will be the 4th Azamara ship. Now, I guess most of you know that Royal Caribbean sold Azamara. The deal should complete by the end of March. They've sold it as 3 ships in the fleets currently. They're all R-class ships. Spookily, interestingly, coincidentally, or obviously, the next day that announcement was made, Princess announced that they had sold Pacific Princess, which is an R-class ship. So the R-class ships are 3 with Azamara. You've got 3 with Oceania, and Princess had 1. So there's lots and lots of speculation that's been bought by Azamara as their 4th ship, because they did make it very clear they're going to expand the fleet. But no, nothing has been announced. Now that could be because they won't announce it until the deal closes. So, but what is interesting is Princess said they've sold it. But you can imagine, I would have thought if they have bought it, presumably they've got a clause which says a sales condition on them closing the deal on Azamara, because they'll be stuck with 1 ship. So I don't know, because one of the questions I would still have is if you're a private equity company, you've bought Azamara pretty good price with quite an old fleet, would it not be more interesting to buy newer ships? But I guess the timeline for those, the cost of those could be much longer. And certainly Azamara is, they have economies by running those. So I think it's probably 60-40, 70-30 chance that they bought it, but no news yet. And I think everyone's predicting it will be that. Sean's left thanks very much, Sean. He's left a super chat as well. Hello, booked Norwegian cruise on Epic on the 1st of August, a 7-night bed cruise. Would love to hear thoughts of chances. It's really hard to predict. My feeling is by August, you would have thought they've made some kind of plan. The bigger issue is whether the way things will settle down is where cruise lines eventually decide to put their ships. Now, the positive side with Norwegian is Frank Del Rio, who's the CEO of the Norwegian group, has said a number of times that he is much more optimistic and that his ships, the Norwegian group ships, are going to be selling in Europe before they are selling in the US. So certainly that would imply that they are looking at keeping ships. They haven't moved that many ships back. In fact, of all the cruise lines, they're the ones that have moved the fewest number of ships back to the US to start the process. So they certainly are hedging their bets there. So I would say it's good odds. Of course, it all depends on what's happening with ports by then. But I would say it feels like, you know, the winds are blowing that Gavin and Luke like specialty dining. I think a lot of people are much more pro specialty dining than perhaps I am. Sunny Travels. Do you think if the US cruise issues persist, will cruise lines simply embark from the Caribbean or simply stay out of US waters? Now, this got a lot of discussion, this real topic, so it's a good one to think about, is when Royal Caribbean announced that they were going to home port. Now, is it Grandeur of the Seas? I apologize if I got the ship wrong, but they're going to home port a ship in Barbados, sailing cruises out of Barbados around the Caribbean. And there was lots of speculation as was this a way of getting around the whole US issue because they didn't enter US waters. Personally, I don't think that's the case, that they did that, because when you look at the itineraries, they're actually offering itineraries that would be hard to actually sail out of the US because they're going to different kind of ports, etc. It's a slightly smaller ship. But the Caribbean, the UK send many of their ships, so P&O, and you've got lots of the European lines, they send ships after the European summer into the Caribbean, a lot of them home port out of Barbados. So there's lots of experience in Barbados of turning and loading ships. There's a whole infrastructure there. So it is possible. However, I think it's unlikely. It feels like it's unlikely because the pure logistics are enormous. And if, you know, what the UK does is they've got this whole system going with, you know, there's a charter, you get on a charter flight, you get there, the whole charter, you know, there's a couple of planes, loads arrive, you get off the ship, you get off the plane, you're bussed straight to the ship, your luggage goes to the ship, the people getting off there bussed and back. So there is quite a complicated infrastructure that's been going for quite some time with kind of various charter airlines. To set that up in the US would be quite a challenge, and just the pure numbers would be enormous. I mean, the numbers even out of Europe are big. It doesn't feel likely, and the reason I sort of saying that is one of the reasons for cruising not starting in the US is because the CDC are not approving it. And if by that time the CDC aren't approving cruising, it's probably also because there are restrictions, I would have thought, on moving out of the country. So you have that whole issue with, you know, at the moment, what the US now have is you have to have a COVID-19 test before you can head into the US. There's a quarantining. I know Biden administration announced that, but they haven't confirmed exactly, as I understand it, what that means. But everybody coming in, but like in the UK, everyone coming in, you have to have a COVID-19 test. You then have to quarantine when you come in. So if that is still the process, it just becomes impractical. So I think it's possible, but unlikely. But, you know, this is just my perspective, and I'm sure other people will have a much will have a view. It just feels quite challenging, but it's possible. The UK certainly have done it very, very successfully. So let's keep going. Let me just go back and see if I have missed any. River cruising. One of the things a lot of people ask me about river cruising, and I don't talk about river cruising enough on these things. So, not Stripe Ferrari 458. Joined late. Better late than never, absolutely. We have a Viking river cruise July the 4th, a week from Switzerland to Amsterdam. Do you think it will happen? And if so, will it feel like a hospital or back to normal? So that's July. Now, this is going to be a very interesting one because lines that rely heavily on English-speaking international travelers, so primarily the US, they need international travel to be open before they're going to start running river cruises. So one of the reasons they didn't try in 2020 is international travel wasn't possible. People can come in from the US into the EU and without quarantining and all that kind of stuff. So a lot of it is going to hinge around what is the situation with international travel. So at the moment, as we know, everyone's locking down. The EU are about to lock down their borders. The US have locked down their borders. UK locked down their borders, et cetera, et cetera. So that becomes a real big challenge. I think the view is probably by July, as we into summer, head out of this wave, more vaccination, international travel should hopefully come back. Saying that, certainly in Europe, a lot of noise is being made by different countries, including the UK, about not booking summer holidays at this stage. It's too uncertain. And I think that uncertainty is around people moving between borders, because one of the things that the new variants, so the UK variant, which certainly being the UK, I mean, it's horrific what's happened with that new variant, how fast it's spreading and the impact it's having on cases and deaths is very scary. You've got the South African variant, the Brazilian variant, I think there's a Danish variant now. So there's a real concern around controlling these new variants, which means locking down borders much more. So a lot of it, I think we won't really know if the season's going to open. So that's for things like Viking, Amber Waterway, Uniworld, Emerald, Scenic, those kind of cruises. However, for EU residents, I would say it's a pretty dead cert that they will be running river cruises by then, because the EU, the way they approach their borders, certainly the plan is and has been, is they have everyone within the Schengen zone, which I can never remember how many countries in the Schengen zone, but it's a lot, like 20 or so. But in the Schengen zone, there is free movement between those. So it's very hard for them to lock down borders, although they have at times. But what happened in the summer is people could move between the borders. So there was about 20 ships ended up running in this past summer, river cruises. So you've got lines like Cross Europe and Nico Cruises, perhaps less known for in the UK, the US, Australia kind of names. So definitely those will be, a lot of it will hinge on international travel. So a lot of it, I think, depends on what we see over the next 2 or 3 months. The good news about river cruising, though, going back to your original question, river cruising can be switched on really, really fast. So the problem that ocean cruises have is, someone in the UK are saying it's going to take them 12 weeks from the time that they're told they can open to be able to sail, because they have to get crew back, the logistics of getting the ship up and running, getting it ready, getting all cabins ready, because they're all in storage. They've got to go to the supply chains, they've got to stock it, and the numbers are vast. River cruising is very simple. Well, it's not that simple, but it's very simple to set up. They need to have about between 20 and 40 crew. They all live in Europe, so they are at best a couple of hours away. They can, a lot of them, they often just will drive and commute pretty much for their time on the river cruise. They don't have this massive supply chain and numbers. They maybe have 100 passengers. Their supply chain is very split anyway, because you'll find on a river cruise they take on stores pretty much at every day because they don't have the storage on board, so it's much easier to get up and running. The ships are small, they're easy to get going again, so they can actually turn very quickly. So we saw last summer, cruise lines like Nico, for example. I mean, it was 3 or 4 weeks, I would, at most, between deciding they were going to sail and sailing, because they could do it really quickly. So they can turn it on really, really quickly. So I've gone off on a bit of a tangent, but I think that's quite important. So even if they get late approval, they could sail. So even if in May it looks like they can run, they could be up and running by the end of June quite easily. On your question, will it feel like a hospital or back to normal? Again, you will find that the protocols will exist. The protocols are a hybrid on river between what countries require hotels to do and sort of what the cruise lines are doing. So they have reduced capacity, they have mask wearing, they have one-way systems, they have, as you know, river cruise lines tend to have their own excursions anyway with masks, etc. So they will follow whatever the rules are in the country. So if mask wearing is still a thing, which I would assume is likely to be the case in Europe in the summer still, you will have to wear a mask. So you will find those sort of protocols, but the same you'll find if you come to Europe. I don't know where you're based. I'm assuming you're from the US, but maybe I'm wrong in that, sorry. But whatever you have to do in a hotel, you're going to have to do. Some of the river cruise lines have started to incorporate more testing. because there were a couple of outbreaks. So some have started having a little bit more testing involved as well. And now increasingly, I guess, you're having testing and vaccine to go through the port. So I'm not sure it'll feel hospital, but it's not going to be back to normal for sure. Absolutely, it absolutely won't be back to normal. So let's have a look at people agreeing with that. Thought it makes sense on the things. We've also seen, I saw another, Sean has left a, I think I mentioned that, has left a super chat, which is fantastic. And I saw another super chat which I've now missed on the thing. Someone left a super chat, which is here somewhere, and I've lost it. Sorry, my feed has stopped running. I think it was Sunny Travels, I think. Thank you very much. It's really greatly appreciated. So Nikhil has asked the question, which is not coming up here, but it's coming, I can see it over here, is around P&O. What is the scenario with P&O cruises UK, as UK started with the vaccination the earliest? The UK is waiting. I was talking about a little bit earlier on in the session, which is the UK are waiting until the case rate is down fairly significantly before they commit to a date. This is the government, not the cruise line. The cruise lines are pushing and pushing for kind of an April start with some very local cruises. What they were hoping, which I've forgotten his first name, but Mr. Dingle, runs the Carnival Corporation operations in the UK. So that's all the operations for P&O, Cunard, etc. They report into him, Princess, etc. in the UK. And what he was saying is they're desperately hoping they're going to be able to do some local sailings in April. They're hoping by May that they can start going a little bit further afield. So that's the sort of timing that they're hoping. I do think that we will see quite soon, as Saga did, some movements on dates, because they're still showing relatively early dates. So Andy and Kirsty are saying, we think you should have a different pint for each of your live shows and call it a beer with Bembridge, which is definitely, the problem is my selection of beers would be very narrow because I actually don't drink. So, but I do like, bizarrely, non-alcoholic beers, and there's quite a big range. So we could probably do that. So some very kind comments around, they find them very interesting, Jess P. And hopefully that's answered the questions there. So that is, I think we're heading up for an hour. So I think that's all I've got for you today on the live chat. I really, really appreciate all of you joining. Had really great people. Cynthia, I see, has just left a super chat. Thanks very much, Cynthia. Cynthia is saying, I heard they are limiting people on cruises. How will they select whose reservations will be honored? How they're selecting which passengers to go? Let me just answer that question quickly because I get asked that quite a lot. As you know, the big part of the protocols is sailing with reduced capacity. Now, in some of the cruises, it's 50 to 60%. Saga are hoping to go for 80%. And the way that they're managing that is as follows. One, they control what's on sale. So you'll find some stuff goes off sale. They basically just block cabins. So they can manage that as bookings come through. Bear in mind, bookings aren't steaming ahead, certainly for this year. As we head into 2022, bookings are more robust, but they're at 2019 levels, not above, in spite of all the delays. So they are able to basically control capacity. I think they're hoping by 2022 that will be less of an issue. Secondly, bear in mind that with everything that's going on, a lot of people who have booked cruises ages ago are probably not want to go, and so they will not be paying final balances, shifting cruises, so they can kind of manage the inventory. I think the bigger challenge comes when it's things like maiden voyages. But what we've seen with the maiden voyages is they've all been cancelled, they've all been moved, they've all been changed, so they can then manage it. So I think they're basically managing it that way. So the cruise line is managing their inventory and doing it all that way. So hopefully you found the live stream helpful. I've really appreciated you joining me and the feedback again. Hopefully it was great, and I will do another one next week. As you've seen, I'm playing around a little bit with days. I tried with Friday, Saturday, Sundays. I asked people when they wanted, and they're kind of equal between those days. So Saturday seems to be a good day. It doesn't necessarily clash with other people who you may want to join. So thanks very much for that. And here's to, I always like to say here's to happy sailing, but here's to some really good news coming up. If you do want good news on cruising, by the way, last week's video on Sunday was about good news, although people pointed out the good news for everybody wasn't good news, and if you want to go and check that one out. So until next time, stay well, stay safe, and take care.